Hello and happy Friday. As usual, we will wait a few moments for people to start joining. If anyone is watching already, welcome. Thank you for being so prompt and on time. Can't see anyone viewing yet, so we'll just give it a few minutes. There we go. We've got at least one person watching. Hello. Happy Friday. I was just saying that, jumped up to 5. Brilliant. We'll give it another 15, 20 seconds. Let more people join. Happy Friday. How is everybody? I hope we're all good. Hey, hi William. Hello Alan. Hello Sue. Hello Sonia. Hello Joe. Oh, brilliant. Wow, yeah, brilliant. We've got loads of people here now, so we will kick off. Well, hello and happy Friday. Happy Findmypast Friday. If you're tuning into these for the first time, we do these every single week. It's kind of like a podcast with video. On all things history and genealogy. It started off being very genealogy focused, but now we're kind of broadening it up a bit. It's becoming more about context and discussing the world in which our ancestors lived, as well as tips for research, tricks. And if you are tuning in for the first time and you're new to family history, a lot of the people you will see in the comments are regular viewers, and they really, really know their stuff, and they are ready and willing to help. So this is a great place for people to congregate and discuss shared interest in family history. But if you're new to hobby, it is a hobby, or a passion for most of us. But if you're new to genealogy and you're struggling to get started, this is a fantastic place to ask for advice, get pointed in the right direction. It's a great community of wonderful people. So thank you very much for tuning in. Well, what are we discussing today? I'll just say a few more hellos. Hello, Chris. Hello, Pamela, Megan, Linda, Kelly, Elizabeth, Emma, all my friends. Hello, Pat. Hello, Amanda. Hello, Rosie. Ellie is joining us from the Dundee office. It's the Dundee Christmas party tonight, so we're very, very lucky to have Ellie here. So big thanks to Ellie. What are we discussing today? Well, as I said, I like to make these a bit about context building, trying to step back in time and kind of work out what our ancestors would have thought, felt, experienced, how they would have spent their time. Hi, Miko. Hello, Miko. Glad to see you. And as we are now in December, I thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss Christmas past, how our ancestors would have celebrated, how our ancestors would have celebrated the holidays, some of the traditions that carried on through the generations, and how many of these traditions, many of which seem quite modern, actually have some loose origins way back in the mists of time. I love that when you realize how much of history repeats and how much of the things we do today are influenced by things that people were doing sometimes even 1,000 years ago. So yeah, a little look at the history of Christmas tradition. I thought I'd have a little look at Christmas in the Tudor era, given that that's when parish records date, and that's when those who are fortunate enough who persevere enough, many of us can actually get our family trees back to the 1600s. Then a little look at the Georgian Christmas. You can't discuss Christmas without mentioning Victorians, as they practically invented a lot of the aspects of modern Christmas. Also, I thought I'd take a look at Christmas is also a great opportunity to take your family history research a little bit further. You've got all the family in one place, and that is an opportunity for some serious grilling that shouldn't be missed. So we'll also be discussing that as well. Hello, Carol Ipswich. Nice to see you. Hello, Mark. Hello, Anya. Always glad to see you here, Anya. And actually, I like to start these with question of the week, because of course this isn't. Oh wow, Janice from Thailand. Janice is watching in Thailand. Well, I bet you've got better weather than we've got, Janice. It's getting seriously cold in London at the moment. And Barbara and Raymond, hello. So yeah, questions of the week, just to get the ball rolling, get people talking. So this isn't really family history related. It kind of is, but I wanted to know, do you have any Christmas traditions that you think could be unique or relatively unique to your family? Has there been a tradition or a custom you observed that was done by your grandparents or your great-grandparents? We posted this earlier on Facebook and we didn't get many responses, but Jacqueline Baker, who I think is watching now actually, shared a lovely one, which is toasting the family at midday and remembering those who are not with us. This was started in World War I by my husband's granddad as he was far from home. That's fantastic. We still do it now. with our own family. Also having a brandy and ginger ale while opening our presents in the morning. That's a tradition I can certainly get behind. I guess mine would be the unusual way that me and my sister always sent our letters off to Father Christmas, Santa, whatever you call him. I've yet to meet anyone else who does it in the same way, and this was because it was the way that my granddad did it with my dad. Apparently, my great granddad did it with my granddad. But where most people seem to put them in the post or burn them so that the ashes go up the chimney, it was great. We'd look forward to it all year. It was like a little ceremony. We'd write our letters and we'd go down to the bottom of the garden, and my dad would always save 2 rockets back from bonfire night, and we would wrap our letters around the rockets, fire them into the sky, watch them explode, and then, according to my dad, the fragments of the letter, which were blown up by the rocket, were caught by the north wind, blown to the Antarctic, where the elves stood with giant nets, would scoop them out the sky, take them to Santa's workshop, where they'd be put together, reassembled, and that's how Santa would know. And this was a great cause of concern for 8-year-old me, because I used to be completely terrified that he'd reassemble my letter incorrectly and therefore wouldn't see everything I was going to get. But there you go. That's my one. As I said, I haven't met anyone else who does that yet. And if I'm ever fortunate enough to have kids of my own, I think I'll do it myself. Joe Ilfahosia said, oh, no, you can see you're already responding to someone's query. Amazing. Deborah Roberts said, I've loved every step of my ancestry research, although got a mystery have not solved yet. Well, you're in the right place to ask it. William Shaw, question of the week. Used to have one. Used to go to Longleat Centre Parks every year when I was little, like when I was 2 or something, until I was about 11. Since then, it's been more staying near to relatives, or they can come to see us. Sherry and mince pie after coming home from midnight to church service. Linda Salter, that's a nice one, actually. I think I've done that with my mum before. Hello, Paul, glad you're here. Linda Robinson, my dad, yeah, he's a very sweet man. He looks terrifying. He's huge, but soft as anything. Hello, Carol. And Anya said, we put them in the fire, but not a lit fire, and we ran to the window to see if we could see the letter to Santa flying off to the North Pole. It's amazing, isn't it, how these memories from quite early childhood can really carry on and stay with you for a very long time. Anyway, Christmas. Actually, before we kick off, just a quick notice. If you are tuning in for the first time, one of the other reasons we started doing these is every single Friday we release brand new records on Findmypast. This week is no different. That's why we call them Findmypast Fridays. Some weeks we add loads of records. Some weeks we add less, but the main point of it is that we think that every record set we add, no matter how small or niche, will be filling a gap for someone somewhere. So while you may see some of the list of records and go, oh, there's nothing there for me this week, there may be next week. And it means that basically every week is a better week to search for your ancestors, because there's more opportunities for discovery. And we are big believers in kind of getting as many weird and wonderful collections as we can, because, as I said, that they will be a brick wall buster for someone. And yeah, we continue to do that. And this week is no different. We've added a big old update of United Kingdom deaths. These are very recent. These are from 2000 to 2017. And you think, oh, well, why might they be useful? Well, if you're trying to track down a living member of a family branch that's somewhere separated from your own and you're no longer in contact, it's a good way of checking if someone is still alive. So very handy for tracing, when I say living, relatives who may be living or were living recently. Similarly, a big collection of UK electoral registers from 2002 to 2019, just under 100,000 of those. Again, they're handy for tracking down living relatives if you were thinking of getting in touch and trying to form a relationship. But we're not forgetting about your ancestors. We've also done a big old update to our collection of Cornish burials. That's about 76,000 new records from nearly 60, I think it's 57, yes, it is 57 parishes across Kernow. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but a beautiful part of the country. Also, we've added a new collection of New York marriage index cards from the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. We always like adding New York records, of course, because it's such an important emigration hub. We discussed transatlantic ancestors the other week, and many people commented to show how loads of people's ancestors went over there and came back to the UK. Not everyone who went stayed. So even if you haven't found any ancestors in North America yet, it doesn't mean they didn't go there. Just worth bearing in mind. And also a big old update newspaper. We're still smashing it with the Scottish newspapers. We've got 3 new Scottish titles. We've got the Kilmarnock Herald and North Ayrshire Gazette. That was a weekly local newspaper. We've also got one called the North Briton, which was published in Edinburgh. And the North Briton, confusingly, is not to be confused with the North Briton. Sorry, so there's North Briton and the North Briton. They're not meant to be confused because the North Briton was a really voraciously anti-Scottish publication that was published by the radical politician John Wilkes. So it was an English newspaper basically attacking the Scots. So the North Briton is completely different. It is a Scottish newspaper compact with Scottish news and Scottish stories. And last but not least, we've added another one called the Northern Chronicle and General Advertiser, which was published, I think, I'm not even going to try and guess which region of Scotland, but around Inverness, that neck of the woods. There you go. So that's records out the way. Now it's just time for Christmas. Actually, before I dig in, the reason I'm doing Christmas this week, full disclosure, we probably won't be having a Facebook Live next Friday, as it is the Findmypast Christmas office party, which starts before this would start. I'll see if I can squeeze one in. We'll see how we get on. And the week after that, there's some other cool stuff that we want to show off. So I thought this was just watch this space. It's coming in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, this was the one week I had to let out all my Christmas enthusiasm. Pat Allen, yes, thanks for sending this in, Pat. Pat's another one of our very knowledgeable regular viewers who is always helping people out in the comments. Pat said, yes, when my brothers and I are together at Christmas, we become Irish. We can do Irish dancing and know the words to every Pogue song. We can do none of this at any other time of year. We have no Irish heritage. After that, we go to Wetherby races on Boxing Day. Well, I like the fact you pretend to have Irish heritage for a day. I was very shocked when I found I didn't have Irish heritage according to my DNA test, and I was actually a little disappointed. So maybe I might do that. I might pretend to be Irish for a day. Tess Martin, hi Alex, not Christmas related, but wondering about the new Dundee records. I'll say a quick note on that before I dive in. I have a German ancestor who pops up in Dundee as the manager of the Royal Hotel in 1914. That is also the year he naturalised as a British citizen. I haven't been able to identify his wife or find much else about his life in Dundee. I'm wondering if the new records might help me find more information about my ancestor during this time. I believe they will, yes, because as well as the photographs, I should quickly say thank you to everyone who tuned in last week, and thank you as well to Miko and Dr. Erin for their fantastic broadcast. It was a great day for Findmypast last Friday. We released a huge collection of very, very, very rich records from, I guess, our home city, Dundee, where Findmypast is based. And they included a vast collection of indexed, fully searchable photos from St Andrews University and Dundee Leisure and Culture, and the DC Thompson Archives, I believe, which showed all facets of life in the city from from the birth of photography in the 1840s up to pretty much relatively recently. Amazing to look at. People, places, pets, all sorts. But as well as the photographs, we did also add a large collection of baptism, marriage, and death records. So you may well be able to find your ancestor's wife in there. Also, the rate books, valuation rolls, and electoral registers. They're very good census substitutes. It's definitely worth having a look. I did spot that Miko is in the comments, who is the man behind that amazing project. So maybe Miko could point you in the right direction. But yes, Tess, short answer is yes, they really should. Sorry, Kim. Patricia's went up the chimney. Anya, I'm loving the new Angus obituaries. Yes, obituaries, I should have included them as well. Working on them, they're really detailed as well. They're taken from newspapers, lifted directly, and the obituary books are amazing to look at. Loving the new Angus obituaries, working on a little project now to try and work out more about my partner's Italian family. His father gave us a whole load of photo albums with pictures of the Italian family back to potentially his great-great-granny. Wow, get them digitized. Just they're safe and you will have them forever. Oh, and Karen Harvey said, my mother used to buy a poinsettia flower, I think that's how you say it, every year, at which point I got quite excited. I think there's a tradition around that, but not sure what. Well, if there is, I haven't come across it yet. Bit of further digging there, I think. And William Shaw, newspapers, latest certificates. Helping someone else. Great. Well, in that case, then, as you guys are all helping each other out with your research, Christmas traditions and how were they born? Well, as I mentioned before, a lot of these things that we reckon are quite modern, or at least don't go back that far. Actually, as I said, step back thousands of years. So, of course, decking the halls, decorating our homes, and with all that stuff that goes back thousands and thousands of years ago. Back in the ancient kind of Celtic-y, pagan-y times, people would decorate hedgerows during the cold winter months to create. I love the idea. This is just how superficial people were. They'd decorate the hedgerows to create kind of shelters, attractive shelters for the myriad of spirits that were wandering the country. And they believed by decorating these bushes, they'd make a kind of an inviting place for these spirits to jump in and hide from the cold and basically get snug over winter. This gradually translated, obviously, into all the stuff we know now. But yeah, it goes back to that tradition of adorning evergreens for spirits to hide in. And in some parts of the world, these evergreen boughs would be brought into the homes and the spirits could get respite from the cold within the home. Again, I love this, how traditions and superstitions pass down. Do you know why people say it's bad luck to keep your Christmas decorations up too long? Well, because during these ancient times, people felt that if they didn't get rid of these spirit refuges and kept the spirits cooped up for too long, the spirits could get angry and turn on their hosts. And that is why, to this day, it is considered bad luck to keep your Christmas decorations up. I believe it's after the 6th of January. And of course, we know holly branches were probably the most popular adornment, thanks to their vivid red berries. And I guess that's why the whole red and green are the Christmas colours now. They make a kind of beautiful contrast to when everything's covered in frost, really standing out. And also, quite a contrast to their counterpart, mistletoe, which is very white. And weaving holly boughs has basically been done for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And in Christian times, these would be blessed by the local priest. It's kind of like an evolution of the bringing the spirits in to rest in your home. Of course, when pagan tribes or Celtic populations were Christianized, a lot of these traditions were very well loved and they didn't want to get rid of them. So the church found clever ways of incorporating them and Christianizing them. But yeah, so these holly boughs would be blessed by the local priest and they'd be hung over the entrances of people's homes. And any visitor who arrived during the season would be embraced under the bough, and that would be a sign that all animosity or and bad plans would be left at the door and not brought across the threshold. But a lot of these traditions were suspended in the mid-17th century when that lovely, lovely, lovely man, and this is said with great sarcasm, Oliver Cromwell, decided that Christmas should be banned. It didn't agree with his austere Puritan beliefs. So Christmas was complete during the Protectorate, they called it. During the years when Cromwell was in power, Christmas was completely outlawed. In some places under pain of death. Priests, Catholic priests, or I think any priest caught encouraging Christmas celebrations could be executed. But all these traditions were cancelled, including bows. Bows were banned. Even makeup was forbidden, which kind of shows how strict Cromwell was. It was to be scrubbed off women's faces if detected. But of course, once the monarchy got back in, they chucked this all out the window. And this is where another cool tradition comes in, because they weren't just the monarchy wasn't just satisfied with chucking out a lot of Cromwell's reforms. They wanted to spit on them in some quite subtle ways. So the holly bough was replaced with a kissing branch, because you couldn't get more un-Puritan than a kissing branch, and that's when this came in. So just after the Civil War, but the kissing branch remained controversial because even though the Victorians were big fans of Christmas, they were very stern, and they didn't like some of the more frivolous elements of the holiday season, kissing branches included. But so it drew quite a lot of scrutiny for its lewd associations. And actually, if you type in kissing branch in our newspaper collection during the Victorian era, you will see people debating this and discussing whether they're appropriate. But a compromise, thankfully, was reached. Just another example of Victorian weirdness. I love it. The Victorians decided that mistletoe or kissing branches would be allowed, But every time a gentleman did kiss a lady under the kissing mistletoe, one of its berries had to be removed. And that meant that eventually the branch would be stripped bare. So kissing would be limited and kept at acceptable proportions. They didn't want any excessive kissing, even at Christmas. And of course, actually, I'll talk about Christmas trees later. You can't talk about Christmas trees without putting it in the context of the Victorians. So we'll leave that for a little bit. But in Germany, obviously Christmas trees came from them, but so did other things like tinsel, which came a lot later. That was originally made from pure silver, which I find amazing. And legend has it that candles were first candles on Christmas trees, or candles as a festive decoration, were actually introduced by none other than the famous theologist, whatever you want to say, Martin Luther himself. But of course, there's loads of others that I haven't mentioned. Those are just a few. But if any of you are listening thinking, why didn't you mention that one? Pop them in. Let us know. Let's see what people are saying in the comments. Everyone's, thank you, Miko, helping people. It's fantastic to see. Everybody just helping each other out. That's brilliant. Nicole has said, Alex, how can I tell if an ancestor married? Well, if you've looked in marriage records, can't seem to find one there. Had 2 wives, but he was a travelling showman. Banns are also another way. You can at least find out if they had an intention to marry. Marriage notices in the newspapers. I know that's one I say all the time. It's quite obvious, but if you haven't tried it, definitely worth looking. Well, if anyone else has got any, do pop them in. Norma Kuhn said, tree up Christmas Eve. Presents in a pillowcase. These are her family's Christmas traditions. Games around the table and Boxing Day presents off the tree. Similar for my mum too. I like that. That's traditional. That's old school. That's good. Not forgetting my grandstanding to the anthem for the Queen's speech at 3 p.m. on Christmas Day. Yeah, my grandfather used to stand up for the Queen's speech, which I thought was very, very sweet. Emma Tracy, I have ancestors that were police in the 1800s. I found them on censuses, but is there a way I could find more information on them? Crime records, law enforcement were also referenced in many court documents, arresting officers, things like that. Newspapers, again, you might find him as a witness. They would have only included his surname, so you might want to put his rank, then surname, or officer something, constable something. We do have some police records, but they don't cover the country as a whole. They're quite scattered in different parts of the country. But I think Google's your friend there. Have a little look. Sonia has said poinsettia flowers is also a tradition in South Africa. Think coming from the English. That is fascinating. A little bit of cultural overlap. Brilliant. Well, I will leave you to continue to help each other as you are doing. Joe said, fun fact of the day, Oliver Cromwell is responsible for American Pilgrim Fathers. Of course. One of my ancestors helped King Charles I escape via Sean. That is an amazing ancestor. That is cool. If you fancy sharing more info with us, like his name, that'd be awesome, Joe. I'd like to read about that. Josephine Duke, why is Boxing Day so called? That was a good question. I may have had in my notes, but I can't be sure. But anyway. So back to Christmas. As I said, those were some of the kind of the really early origins I mentioned before, but there's loads of stuff that we have carried on. There's other stuff that we haven't and we've forgotten. Some stuff I think we should bring back. For example, ghost stories. I know that A Christmas Carol is very well known, but telling ghost stories at Christmas is actually quite an old tradition. You find loads of Christmas ghost stories in our newspaper collection. I'm not sure whether families would have gathered around and told ghost stories at Christmas, but spectral sightings and tales of the supernatural do seem to have been popular around that time of year. And who doesn't love a good ghost story? But again, I would recommend searching for Christmas ghost stories in our newspapers, because there's loads and they're just a great read. Another one I thought was quite a nice tradition that maybe it's practiced in some parts of the country anymore, but I'm not particularly sure, is one called Thomasing. So I'd never heard of before. But apparently the 21st of December is St. Thomas's Day. And pretty much up until the 1930s, I think, actually, poverty-stricken families that were struggling at Christmas used to knock on the doors of those more well-off and ask for a handout in the form of food, drink, or money. Again, this is a really, really old tradition that probably dates back to the early medieval times. It was the one day, and think how class-focused British culture was, and probably, well, really still is. We're obsessed with status and class. But traditionally, there was a lot of shame associated with being poor. And Thomasing on St. Thomas Day was pretty much the one day of the year when there was no shame associated with begging. Quite similar to trick-or-treating, really, I guess, in the United States. And it was practiced by many. Rich households would actually make sure their kitchens were preparing hampers for the poor. And this kind of was a bit of a precursor for caroling. It kind of got replaced by caroling, where you would sing for whatever donation you got, whereas Thomasing was basically just festive begging. The poor would call on the rich, and the rich would bestow charitable donations of food, drink, or money on them. And with so many people in the United Kingdom relying on food banks at the moment, Christmas obviously is a happy time of year for most of us, but for some people, it's a very hard time of year, very stressful time of year. For many, a sad time of year, and I think we can all benefit from being a little bit more charitable in our outlook, and because really that is what Christmas is all about, isn't it? Goodwill to all men and all that. But I will stop moralizing. Just checking the comments again. Just love seeing people help each other out. Oh yeah, Karen Alcott. I love watching Christmas films. My favorite is Elf. I'd be very keen to hear about your favorite Christmas films. What did I watch yesterday? I'm going through them all at the moment. I've watched the original 1947 version of Miracle on 34th Street because I'd never seen it. And it was brilliant. I couldn't get over how modern it felt for a film I made in 1947. Like, even the premise of, a kind of successful single mother career woman with a huge, nice flat in New York and working, with a really high-powered job seemed very progressive for a film made in 1947. But it's just a lovely film. Every version of it is amazing. I do love the Dickie Attenborough version from the 90s. The 1947 one is brilliant, very clever, and I love the way they constantly keep you doubting. Even at the end of the film, you're never completely sure whether he is Santa or not. It's left up to your own imagination, and I like that. Oh wow, Pat Allen said, "While I was in hospital this week, my bed neighbour was a pagan. She claims that pagans are responsible for introducing Christmas trees to brighten the home for winter festivals." Yeah, kind of as I was alluding to before. And I think that kind of paganism is probably making a bit of a comeback. That's fascinating. I don't think I've ever met a pagan. Amanda Reed, we always donate to the Salvation Army. That's a lovely tradition. And I think I should do something similar this year myself. Rico is funny. Arthur Christmas, another good one. Great. So Chris Green got in July. Oh, great. Wow. Anyway, so Thomasing, that's another one. Obviously, you probably know about Yule logs. The reason I think Yule logs are a tradition we should bring back was that back in the very ancient, the kind of old Scandinavian times, I believe the tradition was that as long as the Yule log was burning, no one had to do any work. And that appeals to me for obvious reasons. No, I don't mean I love my job here. I mean more around the house. If a burning Yule log meant I didn't have to wash up or help my dad with sprouts, I'd find the biggest, chunkiest log I could find and make sure it burnt for as long as it's possible. Another one is the ashen faggot. So this was an old West Country tradition. I think it's actually still practiced in some parts of the West Country. And basically what they do is they get a large bundle of ash sticks, and they bind this with 9 green lengths of ash. And then it was burnt on Christmas Eve, and the whole family would gather round. And it would be a great cause for celebration. It was largely an excuse to have a good few drinks. And what some people would do is they'd sing dumpster carols to many, many drinks. And apparently, this is the crazy bit. It shows you how our ancestors were often bonkers. There's loads of great photos about the kind of ashen faggot drinking ceremonies in West Country papers like the Bath Chronicle or the Weekly Gazette. And apparently, some crazy families would place the youngest member of the family on top of the burning faggot. And the length of time he stayed there would tell how brave he would someday be. And I think there's a good reason why that element of the tradition has died off. Health and safety was not a thing. we used to have a satsuma in our gift. I'm guessing it is. I still get satsumas in my stockings even at 31. My mum still places them there, and obviously the kissing bowl. Maybe we should bring that back. But on to the Tudor Christmas. As we said, people mainly associate Christmas with, good old-fashioned Christmas with Victorians. Well, you may be surprised to know that the Victorians actually associated merry old Christmases of yore with the Tudors. They, for some reason, they as we you see it in our Christmas adverts. They say if you're in the UK, sorry if you're not watching the UK, but the Sainsbury's Christmas advert this year is very Victorian themed, and every year there's at least one Christmas advert that decides to take a kind of Dickensian Christmassy tone. So I think it's fair to say that the association between the Victorian era and Christmas is firmly in our modern minds. But for the Victorians, that association was with the Tudors. If you type so in public papers like the Graphic or the Illustrated London News, you'll often find these some of them. Obviously, I love the old newspaper illustrations, but one's like Christmas in merry old England, and they do tend to be of Tudor families. Some of them are quite incorrect. The one I saw at Christmas in merry old England was of a Tudor mother and father with a little baby stood around their Christmas tree. And of course, Christmas trees didn't arrive in the UK until the mid-1800s. But the idea was still there. But yeah, just thought that was interesting that the Victorians were quite keen on the whole idea of Tudor Christmases. And there are reasons for that. Of course, Christmas dinner 500 years ago wouldn't have been quite what you'd expect today. Of course, Cadbury's hadn't been invented yet. Sorry if you're watching the United States, but Cadbury's at Christmas, it's just roses, goes hand in hand. But what would the Tudors eat? They still had Christmas meals. Christmas was still a feast, a religious feast, and food was at the heart of it, as it is at the heart of most celebrations, regardless of culture or where it's happening in the world. But their Christmas dinners were slightly interesting. Let's just say that. Of course, what you ate depended on which rung of the social ladder you sat, and if you were at the low end of the ladder during Tudor times, the odds are you probably didn't eat all that much. But we did a little bit of digging in our newspapers because, as I said, Victorian newspapers wrote a lot about the Tudor Christmas. But anyway, what did they do? So, as I said, normal people basically enjoyed what they could afford. And from the 6th of December, which was Nicholas's Day, jolly old St. Nick, Santa himself, to the 6th of January, which was Epiphany, that was the period of the Tudor Christmas. So from the 6th of December to the 6th of January, actually, today is St. Nicholas's Day. Happy St. Nicholas's Day, everybody. I've only just realised that. If we were Tudors, we'd officially be getting stuck into our Christmas celebrations. Starting from today, Tudor Britons they'd start fasting, they'd worship, they'd observe all the strict religious traditions they were raised to observe. But that would end on Christmas Eve with a big old Christmas feast. Wouldn't have things like meat, egg, or cheese. So it would be pretty limited, but it would, sorry, I've got that wrong. That was a Christmas Day feast. They'd fast on Christmas Eve, and that's when they'd eat no eggs, meat, or cheese. But then they'd have a big old feast where they could have all of that on Christmas Day. I completely mumbled in my head. So the wealthy would eat things like swan. They'd have a Christmas swan, of course, geese. We do still eat geese. Venison was also a very popular Christmas meat. And mince pies were also on the menu. Yes, the Tudors ate minced pies. They contained about, I believe, mince pies had something like 13 different ingredients to honour Tudor mince pies. This was, they'd have 13 different ingredients, and the reason for that was it was honouring Jesus and his apostles. And then they'd also eat mutton as well as a little doff of the cap to the shepherds, who of course were given the news by I can't remember which angel it was. Was it Gabriel? The angel of the Lord came down and glory shone around. But yeah, so a roast swan, I wonder what that tastes like. I think it's a criminal offence in this country, given that they're all owned by a dear old Queenie. They'd also eat Christmas pudding, but their Christmas pudding would contain meat rather than the sweet, rich, boozy dome we're used to today. Tudor Christmas pudding was basically a combination of spices, fruits, but then they'd also put meat that would be formed into kind of like a sausage shape, and it would be served in slices. So it'd be a pudding, like a black pudding, rather than a round cannonball-shaped Christmas pudding. Because when they were cooking all this without a lot of the conveniences we enjoy today. So putting all this together would have taken substantial effort. And working as one of the teams in these big old Tudor kitchens would have been absolutely backbreaking work. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to visit Hampton Court Palace in Hampton Court, but they've got the original Tudor kitchen still there, and it's huge, absolutely massive. You really get a sense. I know this was the king's kitchen, so it would have been unusually large, but you really do get a sense of what a big operation it was. But, they would have had big operations in most large country homes, I would have imagined. But so Tudor cooks would have spent days, perhaps even weeks, preparing their feast for the master and mistress on Christmas Day. And of course, none of these processes could be automated. They all had to be done by hand. So, for example, take a dish called souse or souse, however one you say. It sounds disgusting, but the Tudors were mad for it. This was pickled pig's feet in jelly. And even though it sounds really disgusting, a lot of effort was put into making it. So to make the jelly, the cooks would have to boil the trotters. Even just boiling trotters sounds awful, doesn't it? And then they'd have to clarify the broth that was left over, and that would require sieving and filtering it over and over and over and over again. This would take one person more than a number of hours for just one side dish. This was just one side dish. Another one they enjoyed is marchpane, and this was a paste. This actually sounds a lot nicer than souse or souse. Marchpane was a paste made from ground almonds and pounded sugar. And it's basically what we call marzipan today. There you go. So this marchpane or marzipan was incredibly popular with the Tudors, which isn't surprising when you see how disgusting some of the other dishes were. And they do something that actually I've just remembered now I used to always do with my grandmother around Christmas, which would be carving them into shapes. We used to make them into fruits. We'd make oranges and bananas and strawberries. I remember getting a little needle and making little seed holes on the strawberry. And then we'd get food colouring and we'd paint them. That's great fun. Oh, memories. So the Tudors did that too. I didn't realise, but of course, again, this was skilled work. It all had to be done by hand. So you'd have Tudor cooks sculpting tiny fruits and larger creations for hours and hours on end. But of course, the Lord. I keep on saying, of course. I keep saying, of course. But what did the lords and ladies eat? Who were the people having the best Christmas dinners, and what were they eating? Of course, it was the wealthy, and feasting was a chance to impress. If you didn't have an incredible centerpiece in the middle of the table, something to make everyone go, you weren't worth talking about, and that was a big deal for your Tudor lord and lady. So another discussed. Well, it could sound quite nice actually, but a traditional Tudor table centerpiece would be the cock and thrice. And there are recipes for cock and thrices in the newspaper archive, one which I pulled out. So the cock and thrice, I don't know who came up with this. My only guess, it must have come from the imagination of someone who hated both people and animals. It was the front, it sounds so weird. The cock and thrice was basically the front half of a pig, the back half of a goose or another large bird with the legs left on. And they were kind of stitched together to create some horrific mythological demon beast that everyone would lick their lips at and dig into with great enthusiasm once it was put out. But of course, if you didn't fancy cock and thrice, there were other options. You could eat peacock. The Tudors did also eat roasted peacock. They'd even dress it in its cured skin, so it would look beautiful. And then you could skin it all over again and eat its charred remains. But they didn't just stop there. If you went to your neighbour's party one Christmas and they were serving dressed peacock, and you didn't want them to get one over with you, how could you surpass that? Well, you could do what some Tudors did, which would be to stuff the peacock's beak with gunpowder, which would relate in a fascinating pyrotechnic display at the dining table. It would be set on fire on its way to table, so the peacock would come in like that, and everyone would be amazed and terrified, I imagine, as well. So there you go. The Tudors did Christmas hard. They really, really went to town And actually, I'd quite like to see burning peacock table centerpieces. I wouldn't maybe be keen on eating a peacock, and I'm definitely not keen on seeing a cock and thrice anytime soon. But yeah, there you go. One Tudor tradition I did like that could be quite fun. I'd have to find out my family crest first, though, is they'd often create large salads which would be placed in the shape of the family crest in the center of the table. So even the salad could be a centerpiece. Worth going. Worth having a go. So if anyone does create a family crest salad centerpiece for their Christmas table, share it with us. Oh, I forgot poor Tudors. Poor Tudors weren't exempt from eating disgusting things either. They would eat the umble pie, which I'm guessing it probably comes from humble pie. And basically the umbles were the innards. The umbles were the innards from all the animals that the aristocracy or the wealthier people would slaughter for Christmas and they didn't want to eat. And these would be gifted to the poor, often as an act of Christmas charity. And the umbles would make these into umble pie. And I guess we don't really know how disgusting an umble pie would be. It would depend on the umbles used and the umble people that were baking it. I'm going to stop with rubbish wordplay now. And before I look at Georgian Christmases, I realised I haven't looked at the comments, so let's have a look. Anya, the Beatles make me think of Christmas. Instead of going to Panto, we went to the bootleg Beatles every Christmas. So when I hear them, I think of Christmas. I like that. That's a Christmas tradition that isn't necessarily Christmas, but is Christmassy to you. And as a massive Beatles fan, I wholeheartedly approve. Actually, completely unrelated. I watched that Yesterday film the other day, the one about the chap who wakes up in a universe where the Beatles never existed and passes his songs off as their own. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was good fun. If you're a Beatles fan, I would recommend. Rosie Murrell, is Alex going to be the Lord of Misrule at the FMP Christmas party? I might put in an application, actually. I should probably check with HR first. And as Miko said, why change the habit of a lifetime? Old Mother Riley on TV on Christmas morning. I think I remember my grandfather talking about that. Who doesn't love mince pies? Just replying to Karen there. So Amanda Tarrant, yes, pagans started annual festivities. The Druids and pagans gather around the stone circle at Avebury and Rollings and Stonehenge and many more nationwide and have a winter ceremony on the 21st of December, the winter solstice, Yule, hence Yuletide, to praise the land, the earth, to encourage new crops, praising north, south, west, and east. Xmas trees only started after the Victorian times, as we know famously, by our favourite... Prince Albert. Swan, I've been told, is just like goose, according to Linda Robinson. She's been told. She hasn't been going out hunting swans. Illegal mince pies, another legend. Ooh, Anya, thank you for sharing that. That's going to be my reading home on the train. Sue Kelly, my mother used to make brawn from boiling pig's head and extracting all the meat. Wow, that sounds appetizing. Audrey. Hey, Audrey. My mother used to make amazing mince pies, and when she wasn't able to make them on her own, she had help from my sister-in-law and nephew. She died in December last year. Sorry to hear that, Audrey. So we had some at her funeral. That's made her recipe. She was keen that her recipe should live on, and we are happy to oblige. One day, Audrey, if I ever see you at an appropriate time of year, I would very much like to try one of those mince pies. Does it have the 13 ingredients to honour the Tudor tradition of marking the saints and Jesus? Yeah, no, I don't think it would go down well at the Christmas party with him. Anyway, back to the Georgian Christmas. So yes, the Tudors certainly knew how to throw a good Christmas, but so did the Georgians. Obviously, the Georgians came a long time after the Tudors and a long time after Oliver Cromwell, who famously banned Christmas. So by the time the Georgians came along in, I believe it was around 1714, they ruled over a nation that was still kind of rediscovering the fun of Christmas. It was, as opposed to the Tudors and the Stuarts, who were doing all the weird and wonderful stuff I was talking then, like sewing together pigs and swans and all other kind of unholy creations. The Georgians kind of started to kick off a lot of the stuff that we're a little bit more familiar with today. And as with the Tudor Christmas, they marked it across the same period today, St. Nicholas's Day, happy St. Nicholas Day to everybody. And then to Epiphany, which on the 6th of January. And like us, for the Georgians, it was a period of gifting. Obviously, for them, religious worship was still a very important part of it. And on the 25th, they'd have a good old party. I kind of think if you were transported back in time to a Tudor Christmas, you'd be a bit out your depth. Whereas I like to think that if you had the time machine we often dream about and went back to a Georgian Christmas, you kind of know what was going on and you'd kind of be able to blag your way around. But in England, one of the things that the Georgians did was they started bringing foliage from outside in. And this was something that had been done way back in the midst of time, but it stopped. The Georgians were the ones who started bringing holly boughs and evergreen greenery back into the home. But what of the food? Food obviously was a big part for the Tudors, and it was for the Georgians. As I said, under the Tudors, one of the 13 ingredients you would often find in a mince pie was disconcertingly meat. Mutton, to honour the shepherds, was obviously included, but this was thrown out the window during the Georgian era. The Georgian era realised that mince pie should be sweet. And they started to add things like spices and dried fruit, suet, basically the recipe that we recommend today, that we recognise today. Another tradition they liked, which has kind of lived on in the form of caroling. It's kind of an evolution of Thomasing and caroling, kind of, was sailing. Which sounds like great fun. So the wassail bowl was basically a giant bowl of spiced punch that would be passed around the table and sipped from in turn. Not the best for hygiene, perhaps, but it was a good way of getting the party going. And that's probably when you look at not just British history, I think it's probably the case amongst European history. But I do think actually definitely true in the United Kingdom. The most holidays were basically a good excuse to on the sauce, really. Alcohol seems to play a key role in many traditional celebrations, and it seems to have done so for the vast majority of our history. But yeah, so sorry. I was going to talk more about wassailing, but yeah, they'd sing around it, and sometimes the wassail bowl would be paraded through a town. People would go wassailing at people's houses, and they'd beg for drink while they sung a carol. But yeah, another tradition that the Georgians enjoyed that we seemed to have lost, probably because we've shortened the period, really, was the 12th night cake. So Epiphany was super important to the Georgians, as they were, as it was to all of Christian Britain, and as kind of the nation gets less religious over time, things like this kind of start to slip a bit more from the national consciousness. But during the Georgian era, the 12th night was still very important. It signified the end of Christmas, and it was just as important as the start. And they'd signify this day by more gift giving. You'd give gifts to your loved ones on the 12th day of Christmas, as immortalised by the song, on the 12 days of Christmas. I'm not going to say it, don't worry. What was on the 12th day? 10 lords are leaping. If anyone can remember what's on the 12th day, let me know. But yeah, it was a positive day. You'd look forward to the year ahead. So you'd have a night of party and games on the 11th, and then on the 12th, you'd all sit around, look forward to the year ahead, and eat your 12th night cake, which was basically a cake made up from the leftovers of all your assorted Christmas desserts. But it was a forerunner for the Christmas cake we enjoy today. But I think the way the Georgians did it was just kind of whack all the desserts in. Anythingarium, as my grandma used to call it. She made this soup, which there wasn't a recipe written down. It was kind of disgusting. It would change every time. Anythingarium soup was the name she gave it. So yeah, 12th cake or 12th night cake was just a kind of mix of all the desserts thrown in. But of course, it was the Victorians who brought in most of the traditions that we know and love today. One of which being holidays. So wealth. Prior to the Victorian era, Christmas wasn't really a holiday period. You'd get Christmas Day off from work, which was a reason why weddings were popular, very traditional, which were very popular traditionally in this country, because for many people, Christmas Day was the only day they were guaranteed to get off from work. So you will see many people in marriage registers getting married on the 25th of December. And when people come across it at first, they often find it a little bit surprised. They think, oh, maybe my ancestors just really loved Christmas. No, it was a really common thing. Actually, sometimes they'd have mass batch weddings up and down the country where priests would marry loads of couples at once. And it was quite a celebrated tradition, even though the reasons for it probably shouldn't be celebrated, that poor people couldn't afford to take any time off work. But if you type in Christmas weddings in the newspapers, you will find loads of reports about it, even going up to the 1950s and 60s, some of which include fantastic photographs. One I saw, which was great in the 40s, is just called Christmas Crackers. And it's a big picture of a Christmas cracker where they've got all these very 40s in design, and they've got headshots of different couples, saying all the local couples that got married on Christmas Day that day, and then there's a column at the side which explains a little bit about every couple describing the wedding. It's really cool. Yeah, just thought I'd squeeze that in. But yeah, so the wealth that was being generated by new factories and industries during the Victorian era basically allowed middle-class families, not the working-class families, they still had it tough, to actually start taking longer off. And that's when people started taking Boxing Day off, 26th. And someone was asking before, Boxing Day, why was it called Boxing Day? I did have it in my notes, which I do rely on sometimes. I must admit, I haven't remembered off the top of my head. But Boxing Day basically earned its name because it was the day servants and working people opened the boxes, which they had collected, gifts of money from basically rich folk. And those, so yeah, that's where Boxing Day comes. But of course, railways was still a newfangled invention back then, and they meant middle-class people could move across the country with greater ease. They could go and see their family. They could leave their place of employment and visit their family for a little bit longer. So yeah, Victorian era is when the Christmas started to be viewed more as a holiday, a time to spend with family rather than work, a time to kick back, relax, and spend it with your nearest and dearest, the people who matter most. And of course, the Scots have always traditionally preferred to postpone the celebrations for a few days to welcome in the new year. Obviously, Hogmanay celebrations are fantastic. I've only ever been to one in Aberdeen, and it was something I won't forget. I would love to repeat. But Christmas Day itself didn't, for that reason, Christmas Day itself didn't actually become a really big day in Scotland until Victoria's reign. And really, according to some, I haven't been alive long enough to testify to this personally, but Boxing Day has only become a kind of really recognised tradition in Scotland for about 40, 50 years. Again, I'm getting that from what I've read. So if I'm completely wrong and there are any Scots in the comments wanting to correct me, I fully welcome that. Other things, of course, gifts. Gifts were given during the Georgian era on the 12th day, as I said. But children's toys, the whole idea of giving children joy at Christmas was very much, again, a Victorian era. Toy shops weren't really a common sight prior to the Victorian era. And again, this is all due to Industrial Revolution creating more disposable income for those middle-class folks. The middle class was growing and growing and growing. These guys had more money to spend on their children. So things like dolls, books, clockwork dolls. Again, they were also being made more cheaply because of industry. So it became more affordable, and giving kids toys at Christmas kind of blossomed in the Victorian era. But poor children weren't left out. Poor children's stockings did become popular from around 1870. And usually they'd be lucky to find something like an apple, an orange, or a few nuts, which is very sad. Poor Victorian, poor kids. And again, during the Victorian era is when two of the most famous kind of German Nordic imports came over. Santa Claus, Father Christmas. He was originally part of the Old English Midwinter Festival. He'd normally be dressed in green as a sign of the returning spring. But the stories of St. Nicholas or Sinterklaas from Holland came via Dutch settlers to America in the early 17th century. And then during the 1870s, Sinterklaas became known in Britain as Santa Claus. So it went from Holland, kind of Germanic-y regions, over to the US, and then back over to Britain. And with all the key elements is a unique gift distribution system, reindeers and sleigh. That came from Sinterklaas and from the Dutch over to the United States back to England. And of course, then Christmas trees. Of course, Queen Victoria's German husband, Prince Albert, he was the one that brought a Christmas tree over. And it was an image of Victoria, Albert, and their children printed in the Illustrated London News in, I believe, 1845 or 1846 that really popularised it. You can look this up for yourself in our newspaper collection. You can actually see the image that kicked off Christmas trees in Britain. Isn't that cool? I like to think so. You were looking at the same thing that people, you're looking at the thing that introduced the Christmas tree to the masses in this country. And of course, when emulating the royals was a very fashionable thing to do, and as soon as people knew that the royal family had one, and it's a beautiful image. I wish I had the option of showing it to you. It's great. It just looks, it's black and white, obviously, but they've kind of managed to work in the glow coming off from the tree, and the family look very picture perfect, with Victoria staring lovingly at Albert and Albert staring lovingly down at the children. It was a hugely popular image which had a real impact. Of course, that is when the trees came over. It was, I must actually to specify, tree of them standing around it, picture of them standing around the tree in Windsor Castle. And then other things, of course, I'm going on time, aren't I? What am I like? Turkeys. So turkeys had been brought to Britain from America hundreds of years before the Victorian era. But when Victoria first came to the throne, both chicken and turkey were still way, way, way too expensive for most people to enjoy. So people in the north of the country, my homeland, people would normally eat roast beef as their traditional fare for Christmas dinner, whereas in London and the south, where people were a little bit more affluent, goose was their traditional favourite. Of course, poorer people who couldn't afford either would make do with things like rabbit or other game that they could catch or kill themselves. But Victoria herself started off eating swan. You can find details of the royal Christmas menu in the newspapers in 1840. It said the main set pieces of their dinner was both beef and, of course, royal roast swan. But by the end of the century, so by the 1880s, 1890s, turkey had become a lot more affordable, and turkeys were coming a lot more in demand. And I love this. This led to, it's quite sad actually, but a great turkey exodus. So thousands of turkeys would be marched, a death march really, to London, normally in October. And to make it even sadder, their little feet were clad in hard-wearing leather. So their feet wouldn't hurt. Apparently, this is something I came across in the newspapers. I don't know how true it is. And they would have walked about 80 miles from Norfolk Farms. That's where most of the turkeys were farmed, on their death march to London in their little leather boots, and then taken to places like London's Leadenhall Market, where they would be butchered and sold. So yeah, turkey is also not a Victorian invention, but that's when it started to arrive on the scene. And last but not least, you probably know the story of Christmas cards. Penny post, I think I covered it last year. Penny post was introduced in Britain in 1840 by a chap called Rowland Hill. Idea behind it was simple and amazing. Basically, a penny stamp paid for the postage of a letter or card to anywhere in the country. This was a huge, it doesn't sound like it, but it was a big deal in the kind of history of communication, because it opened up the postal service to millions of people who were too poor to use it before. So that was one of the things that set the scene. But then Sir Henry Cole, who was a good friend of Prince Albert, actually, I believe. He tested the water in 1843 when he printed thousands of cards in his art shop in London and sold them for 1 shilling each. Little did he know that this would just explode, and they were in such demand that it expanded his... It became huge, and by 1870 it became even bigger, because then they introduced halfpenny postage, not just penny postage. That meant even more people could send Christmas cards, or send more of them. And then what you've got to add on top of that is the railways. So then you've got your penny post, the railways, and the halfpenny post, and sending Christmas cards became a thing. Another note back to newspapers: if you have access to the newspapers, Christmas card designs were printed every year, and it's lovely to see how they evolved. Also, the cards the royal family would send to other royal families were printed every year, and they're very, very, very interesting to look at, because they're not always festive. A lot of the time, they were kind of geopolitical messages. So you'll see that the Christmas cards sent by the British royal family in like 1913 to the Kaiser featured lots of big warships. And while they were saying Merry Christmas to Cousin Willie, what they were actually saying was, don't forget, our navy is big. You don't want to mess with it. But yeah, another fascinating little piece of history. And last but not least, along with Christmas cards, you had the famous Christmas cracker. These were invented by a chap called Tom Smith, who was a London sweet maker. And funnily enough, they were invented pretty much the same time as the first Christmas card, around 1846. His original idea was to wrap his sweets in a twist of fancy coloured paper, like with roses and stuff you see now. So even your roses have an old Christmas history going back to the early Victorian era. Not early, but mid to early Victorian era. But so at first he did this, but then when he realised, he kind of experimented a bit, and then he added love notes, so like mottos, you'd get little love notes in them, which made them sell even more. And then he thought, why don't I add some paper hats in? Added the paper hats, sold even more. And then small toys, sold even more. And they needed to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But he thought, we can make it even more exciting. And that's when the bang got added, and the rest is history. So yeah, that was my list of Christmas inventions. Of course, there were loads I didn't mention. Christmas carols. A lot of our favourite Christmas carols were invented by the Victorians. You've got O Come All Ye Faithful, one of my favourites, 1843. You've got Once in Royal David City, which was 1848. You've got O Little Town of Bethlehem. That's one I remember singing in primary school, 1863. No, that was 1868. Sorry, I'm getting it confused with Away in a Manger, which was 1883. There you go. The Victorians did love their Christmas. And that brings me nicely up to the hour, 6 o'clock. Dorian Elwoodson, 12 Days of Christmas has religious meaning. Oh, wow, I'll have to look at that. Thanks, Audrey. I'm just going to make sure I get them into pile too. I like the 12 Days of Christmas by Frank Kelly. Oh, wow. Father Jack from Father Ted. Not one to look up on YouTube if you don't like swear words. Well, I am quite partial to swear words on you, so I'm good. 12 Lords of Leaping. Thank you, Lindsay. That's it, yeah. Oh no, it's 10 Lords of Leaping. Yes, no. Corrected by Kevin. 10 Lords of Leaping, 12 drummers drumming, 11 something. 11 ladies dancing? 12 drummers drumming, 11 ladies dancing. I'll look it up when I get off this. Anya said, I've got loads of Hogmanay weddings in my tree. That is really cool. So they must be the same. That must be similar to the Christmas Day tradition of I'm assuming it's because it's the only day people got off work. Did not know that. That's a fact for the day. And you've also said you should go to the edit. You go, yeah, that is on my bucket list of things to do. I'm actually away next week on a little Christmas break myself, so I'm very looking forward to that. But sadly not to Edinburgh. Thank you, Annette. You have corrected me. He said, I'm a Scot in my 40s. Boxing Day has been a holiday here my whole life and beforehand. There you go. Happy to be proven wrong. I did suspect when I read that, I thought, that doesn't sound quite right. I blame the BBC because that's where I got it from. Rebecca Bolson, listening while wandering around Walmart in Ottawa. That is so cool. Wow. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. And thank you for everybody who's tuned in. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope you've enjoyed a slightly early Christmassy special. I won't, as I said, I'll try and do a broadcast next week. I might not be here, but I'll be definitely back the following week where we've got some exciting new stuff to show you. Ooh, what could it be? Watch this space. And yeah, as Miko said, Christmas is a time for miracles, but probably more. I thought you were making a statement about Christmas. Sorry. Ugly Christmas sweaters. Perfect for the dapper historian. Yeah, you get one of them, Miko. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's tuned in. This has been fun. I've enjoyed it. I'm feeling especially Christmassy now, even more than I was. And we can't seem to come to a consensus on what the gift was on the 11th day of Christmas. So we will have to take that offline. But yeah, thank you very much to everybody who tuned in. Massive thanks to everyone else who helped other people with their queries and comments. You guys are the real heroes here and keep these things going. Really, really do appreciate it. And in the new year, we will hopefully be doing more for you and rewarding all the hard work and support you give us because you guys are amazing. Ooh. Another one for me to look at. I have a long commute home on you, so I'm grateful for all of these. But anyway, on that note, I am going to wish you all a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Very early, but Merry Christmas. Hope you're feeling in the spirit. And I will see you again, if not next week, the week after. So long, farewell, and